Okay, good afternoon to anybody joining us here online. Good afternoon to anybody here in the house. And I am Sarah Craig. I'm the Executive Director of Caffe, Lena. And I'm sitting here with Cheryl Hage-Perez. And she is the Executive Director of the Veterans and Community Housing Coalition. And we met during the pandemic.
Yes, we did. I couldn't have gotten through without you.
Yeah. So this is a brand new program that we are just starting for the very first time today. We're going to try it for a few months and see what happens. We're going to gather here on the first Tuesday of every month. And I hope that people who are leaders in nonprofits, people who are volunteers in nonprofits, come and get together in this room for just like a half-hour hangout session to just get back in touch with what inspires us to do work in the nonprofit sector, or, as it gets called around here a lot, the social impact sector. So that's really what this is about. It's called the Art of Community. We're in a space for the arts, and it's really all about how we serve our community and use both art and social services to make it stronger for everybody. And one of the things that has driven this is my curiosity about the path that all of these different wonderful leaders have taken to get into the lives that they have, which are lives of pressure and service and satisfaction that you can't get from anything else. Cheryl, how did you get on the path to become the executive director of your organization?
Sarah, in my 20s, I found myself exiting a domestic violence situation with 2 children. And if it weren't for my parents, I would have been homeless. But they were so supportive of myself and my children. And I had no education. I had no work skills. And so I received all the support services I could get. I applied and received Section 8, Medicaid for myself and my children, food stamps, HEAP, whatever was out there, I used as a stepping stone. And I was fortunate to get scholarships to go back to college. But when I would go to social services, my father's cousin was the commissioner, and my mom was his secretary. So when I would go, I was treated like a princess. Oh, come in, don't wait, here's your form, we'll help you fill it out. But as I sat there, I noticed that other people weren't being treated the same way. They would be sitting there for hours while the staff were sitting in the back room laughing and having coffee. Or the way they were talked to, I found myself advocating to people I didn't even know, say, why are you talking to them this way? You're acting as if they're asking for money out of your own pocket. This is their entitlement, and you're putting them down for requesting it. And at that point, I realized that I had to work to be able to give voice to the people who didn't have the ability to speak for themselves. And while I was doing that, I worked in mental health, I worked in developmentally disabled, and then I worked in homeless people living with AIDS. And through there, I saw so many men and women who served our country, protecting our freedoms, homeless. And I couldn't understand that. So I did some research, and when this position opened, I said, that's where my calling is. I had a passion for it. My father and his 2 brothers served in World War II. I had a cousin, I lost a cousin in Vietnam, another cousin who came back with severe PTSD from Vietnam. My son and son-in-law were in the Marine Corps, and 2 of my grandsons.
Wow.
So I thought, what if these boys and girls don't have family or people to speak for them? That's where I need to be, and that was my commitment.
Wow. You know, when you walked into that office and you had family connections to the people who were in charge, and you could so easily, if you had been a different person, kind of taken their side or joined that team and look down at people. Why didn't that happen?
It just wasn't who I was. And, you know, a lot of these women had little kids with them. And I would look in those kids' eyes and see blanks. And when in my kids' eyes, I saw sparkly eyes laughing, and these kids had no hope, and these moms had no hope. And I just felt this draw that I was always known to have a big mouth. That's not new. And I just felt I have to use this voice for something positive to make a difference, because they don't have the ability to speak up for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think if my cousin wasn't the commissioner and my mom didn't work there, that would have been me. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't okay with me. That just did not sit well with me.
You know, you talk about seeing the range of people who are coming to get some help, and then what was starting to pop out for you was the veterans. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about veterans, there's a tremendous amount of gratitude. There's pride. There's patriotic pride. You're also recognizing that people are sometimes coming back from service with a real burden. Does that create conflicts with you dealing with veterans?
Where the conflict is that there's never enough support. While you say there's a patriotism, when somebody presents as homeless, right away there's almost that not in my backyard attitude. I will say that the community of Saratoga and the counties that we work in have been wonderful, very accepting, very supportive, and really put their money where their mouth is to help our veterans. And it is very, very difficult for many of our veterans to transition from military life to civilian life. When they're serving in our military, the reason they're serving is for us. We wouldn't be able to meet here like this, Sarah, if it weren't for them. We wouldn't have freedom of religion, freedom of the press, if it weren't for the men and women who selflessly volunteered to serve us. So we owe them whatever we can give them in return. Sometimes it feels that we can't meet their needs, and it's very, very frustrating. But when we do, when we are able, it's the greatest satisfaction. I think every not-for-profit employee, from the director down, will tell you, you know you're not going to get wealthy working in a not-for-profit. But you get rich in so many other ways that it fills your passion. It's not work. It's a passion that follows you. I've been saying I'm going to retire for 5 years now. And I just can't find the way to do it, because there's always, this project or that project that we still need to do.
What's your favorite part of your job?
My favorite part of the job is when a veteran comes and says, I'm moving, my apartment's all set up, which is done through donations from our community members. We collect furniture, dishes, pots and pans, everything, and we store it. And when our veterans are ready to transition, they go shopping in our big garage. And that's when they say, I'm going home, that to me is what it's all about.
I talked to you once about a year ago, and you gave me just a little snapshot that I remember the feeling of it more than the details of it, of how the organization has grown since you arrived on the scene. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, the population has grown and differed. So our job was to meet the needs of the veterans that we serve where they need to be served. So we have the men's house for transitional, and we have the transitional women's house. We found that once they were ready to transition, there was not enough affordable housing for them to move into. So we built units in the town of Wilton, permanent housing. They only have to pay 30% of their total income, whatever it is, and then we beg for the rest. And then we bought a 2-family home for disabled veteran families and in Ballston Spa. But we realized that still wasn't enough. So we have this program called Support Services for Veterans and Families, and it is a 7-county, Fulton, Montgomery, Warren, Washington, Saratoga, Schoharie, and Schenectady counties. And any veteran who is living in the community that is at risk to become homeless, they're going to be evicted, their power's shut off, or have been evicted, we jump in, provide temporary financial assistance, we relocate them, or we negotiate with the landlord, pay off their National Grid bill, and make sure that they don't spend one night homeless. And that program serves over 220 veterans a year.
Wow.
Then we found that there was a big gap in very low-income disabled veterans. So we started a program with funding from HUD where we lease, it's up to 19 apartments now scattered throughout Saratoga County. Mm-hmm. We pay the rent.
Okay.
And all they have to do is pay their utilities and whatever other bills they have. In response to COVID, we found there was a lot of food insecurity going on with our veterans. So we started a food pantry. And we were fortunate in getting grants to buy perishable food. Because when you have a food drive, people donate, non-perishable items. But we wanted to make sure they had a healthy diet.
Sure.
So we were able to buy meats, vegetables, dairy products. And instead of having the veterans come to us to pick it up, we packed it and delivered weekly. That we felt was safer for them during COVID. Now, we have Guardian House, which is the only VA-funded transitional home for female veterans in New York State.
And transitional means that they are moving from homelessness into permanent housing?
With a goal to attain permanent housing.
Got it. Okay.
They can stay up to 2 years while they work on issues that created the homeless situation, obstacles that were in their path, they overcome them. They develop life skills, and they're able to transition. We help them get some financial stability. If they want to go back to school, we help them with that through case management. One of the problems we faced is due to regulations, we can't take kids. Oh. So some of the women that were interested in getting this help, we had to tell them, well, if you want to come for help, you have to give up your children or you don't get the help you need. And no mom's going to give up her kids, no matter how desperate she is for help. So we would see these women spiral downward, and so were their kids. Mm-hmm. They weren't secure in a school setting. They didn't have a solid relationship with their parent. So what we're doing now is there's no funding. So we've got a grassroots effort going to develop a home and we're going to initially start with 2 apartments for homeless veteran moms and their kids. And they'll receive the same support services that all of our other veterans get. And we'll work with the children. We'll be a liaison with the mom and the school. We'll make sure they get their health care needs. We'll make sure they get their food needs, their dietary needs. Whatever they need, the case management will guide them through.
That seems like, you're looking at this population of people, you're getting to know people, you are seeing probably story after story after story and learning how you can jump in somewhere and be of assistance and help people along the path. I'm sure that it always doesn't go exactly the way that you hope it does. I know there are setbacks. There are times probably when the money's kind of running out. There are times when you get some great grant. There's probably changes in laws that happen. There's just so much to keep track of. How do you not get exhausted by it?
You do get exhausted, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And then you sit back, you reevaluate. You might take a couple of days off. And what helps me is I'll go to one of the houses and I'll sit on the porch with some of the vets, just shooting the breeze and talking about nothing relative to why they're there or their military experience, just talking like you and I are. Mm-hmm. That reminds me why I'm there, what I can do, and what they can do. And they always come and say, thank you. We couldn't have done this without you. And I say, no, I couldn't have done it without you. And I didn't do anything. You did all the work, because they do all the work for themselves. So the revitalization is in watching their success. And that's what motivates you to keep going, to keep looking for other money and other projects to meet their needs, because we're always going to have homeless veterans. Yeah. It's sad to say we always are going to have them. And we have to adapt to what their needs are. And as we see what the population is, we're seeing younger veterans come in. Female veterans right now have the highest increase in the homeless population across the country.
Wow, that's really something.
Yes. And when you think about it, there's only 7 transitional facilities in the county, in the state, in the country. We have the only one in the state. So how are we going to meet their needs? So we're looking at ways to expand upon meeting their need. The other thing we're looking at is a lot of our veterans are aging, and there's no veterans adult home for them to go to. And we find that the peer support is instrumental in their overall well-being. But when somebody ages out of one of our programs, we have to send them to a different assisted living, or it's a whole new. And if they have Alzheimer's, just that change alone. So in our strategic plan, we do hope to create an adult home for veterans.
Wow. And today's Pearl Harbor Day.
Today is Pearl Harbor Day.
I want to say that. Pearl Harbor Day 2021. Wow. And did any of your relatives, did your ancestors serve in World War II?
3, my father.
Yeah.
And 2 of his brothers.
Wow.
My one uncle is a double Purple Heart winner. Awardee.
Yeah.
And all 3 of them had been injured. But they all came back. My poor grandmother, she used to say, She didn't sleep the whole time the three of them were gone. And they served in different parts. My father was in the South Pacific arena. My one uncle was in the European theater, and my other uncle was, he was in Normandy.
Oh,
He
wow.
stormed Normandy on D-Day.
So there must be almost a little bit of a feeling when you sit down on the porch with veterans that you're coming home in a way.
Yes.
That it must feel like
Yes.
family to you.
It feels like family.
Yeah.
And you can relate. And then having my grandsons, my son-in-law, all serving in the Marine Corps. Now I have a nephew that just graduated from boot camp in the Army. And I always sit back and I think, well, what if something happened to one of them? I would want somebody there to support them. And many of these veterans that we serve have lost their support system. And for many reasons, whether it's their post-traumatic stress, their addiction, their anxiety, their depression, they've alienated from their support group, their family, their friends. So they become family.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to see the brotherhood, the support that they give each other. And they build new relationships. And where would any of us be? First of all, without stable housing, without knowing where we were going to sleep at night, without knowing where our next meal is going to come from. I mean, our biggest struggle in the morning is, what am I going to wear? Right?
Right.
And they don't even have a choice of what they're going to wear.
What am I going to wear? Or how am I going to not eat too much?
Yes, yes. And what am I going to have for dinner? Not, am I going to have dinner?
Right, right.
So the things that we take for granted, they have no way of having that reassurance.
Is there one thing that comes to mind when you kind of look out into the world and you see how people regard veterans, people in the armed services? Is there something you want to say that you think that they don't understand, that you want the world to understand about that experience?
I think I see a pride in our country right now for those who sacrifice to serve our country, and then by serving us. I lived through Vietnam when it was deplorable the way our veterans and our military were treated. They were blamed for the chaos going on in Vietnam. But that's all turned around. And I've been with my grandson in his uniform where people have said thank you and bought his breakfast. They didn't buy mine, but they bought his. So no, I don't see anything that especially this community. Saratoga is very generous, and so are the surrounding areas. I think they see the value and what it means for a young boy, a young girl, to say, I'm going to serve my country and serve it proudly. And they do. And they give back. They want to give back to those who serve. And I think that is amazing, considering where we were 50 years ago to how we got here now. The patriotism and giving back to those who are giving to us.
Well, I think partly the country had to come to terms with, what the impact of the war was on people who served and what it meant to, if you were turning your backs on people like that, and that I think a lot of people kind of woke up and realized that if they were against the war, they were putting the blame in the wrong place.
Yes, and they did realize that. Unfortunately, the Vietnam veterans didn't feel that because they felt they were the ones being attacked. And I don't think our country meant to. It was aimed at stopping the war. And they looked at our military members who had no choice but to be there. And it was an awful time, a very dark time in our country's history. But when you see it now, they seem to understand. And what they don't know is every year there's about 20,000 rape charges or sexual harassment charges. 70% women, 30% against men.
Wow.
Of those 20,000, only 500 and change get reported because of the intimidation, the fear. Out of those 500 that are reported, about 250 go to court. And of those 250, there's only 50 convictions. That, to me, is a disgrace. We have to create more public awareness, especially you think about these 18-year-old girls and boys who go in all wide-eyed, I'm wearing my uniform, I'm so proud. And then the difference is, if a woman gets raped in the community, she never has to see her attacker again, unless she's in court getting justice. These military women and men have to see their attacker every single day. They have to work under their command often.
Yeah.
They have to work with them, eat with them, be told what they're going to do, when they're going to do it by then, living in fear of when is it going to happen again. So it's...
Those are probably some of the traumas that affect the outcomes when they leave the service.
It's because they've had to hold it in for 4 years.
Sure.
A lot of them self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. A lot of them have very severe mental health issues, depression, anxiety. And it does hit them. They can't deal with it while they're serving, but as soon as they get out, it hits them. And for a lot of the women, they don't realize, they don't feel like they're considered a veteran because they didn't go to combat. So it's educating them, and it's educating the community on why these veterans are becoming homeless. But as far as the respect they get in the community, I couldn't ask for more.
So we have to wrap up. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to do a sort of twofer question here.
Okay.
Some of the stuff that you just talked about is pretty dark stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. It's a weight. And if you are a young person thinking about their career, you might think, I don't think I can deal with heavy stuff like that. You know, I want to go work for something happy, like Google.
Mm-hmm. Which isn't always happy, I'm sure.
But it sounds like it. Google.
Google me.
So you are willing to put yourself kind of shoulder to shoulder with some very heavy stuff. And as somebody is going through high school, looking at college, thinking about what they want to do with their lives, and maybe they're toying with the idea of the nonprofit sector, do you have any words of advice for somebody in that situation?
I would say follow your passion. Working in the non-for-profit sector, whatever the milieu is, you have to feel it in your heart. It's really not anything that can be taught in college. In fact, one of my college professors wanted to fail me because I said that to him. But it's got to be something you have in your heart. It's an inherent passion to want to help others, to care about how others feel and how others live in order to be successful in a not-for-profit arena. You can't just say, well, it's a job. It's
right.
never
It's not
a job.
just about management. It's
No.
not just about the spreadsheets and the performance reviews and the marketing.
I'll tell you, you're not going to get rich. You won't get rich. All my bills are paid, and I'm comfortable. And the richness is in knowing you made a difference and helped those who weren't in a position then to help themselves. But now they are. And now a lot of them put themselves in a position to help others. Because one thing I learned when I was on my journey and on social services and everything else I could get my hands on was never forget. Never forget your path. Never forget where you came from. Because I would have been homeless with 2 kids if I didn't have the resources I had. I didn't have a car. My father bought a second car, which they really couldn't afford. So I would have access to a vehicle. And we ate dinner there. So I was fortunate. Not everybody has that. And as I said, I've always been able to say what's on my mind. And I couldn't understand why people were treating other people that way.
And so you received kindness and you feel inspired to pass it forward, and that keeps you going through thick and thin.
Yeah.
And
my grandmother, I was very, very close to her. Mm-hmm. And she always told me to never forget who you are. And you'll get back, whatever you give, you'll get back 10 times. And she was right.
I think that keeps a lot of nonprofit leaders going. And
Yes.
Cheryl, I thank you so much for the work that you have dedicated
you.
your entire adult life to.
Thanks
for
you.
your determination, and thanks for being a great neighbor and coming back up here to the Caffe Lena stage.
This is just I'm just so reminiscing of my younger days, many, many years ago. But the place looks great. You've been a great neighbor, and I thank you for that.
Thanks. It's a lot of fun. So we are going to be back here on the first Tuesday of, it'll be January
Yes.
then. First Tuesday of January. And we would love to have you come. We have some free coffee and cookies at the back of the room, so feel free to drop in and be here in person. You can ask some of your own questions or join us again online. Cheryl, again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right.
It was a pleasure.
Yep.